Many of you may know that I sometimes like to write short stories about certain events that take place in the FNaF series, not necessarily depicting what I believe or what is actually canon, but rather just a narrative format of these events purely for entertainment purposes. I've done one for the death of Charlotte, the death of the bite victim, the death of Elizabeth, and a hypothetical and unlikely but fun way of showing the death of Michael Afton. So what I wanted to do now was a depiction of the missing children incident, showing it from the perspectives of the first two victims as well as William Afton. Keep in mind that this doesn't have to be exactly how the whole thing went down, it's just my own depiction of it that kinda makes sense, and it's all just for fun, so sit back and enjoy. The game isn't helping. Susie stood at the Fruity Maze arcade game with a frown. Recently, her dog Max had been hit by a car, and she'd been devastated. It was lucky for her that school had just ended, because she knew that she wouldn't have been able to focus. She knew people would have questioned her. Unfortunately, though, that wasn't something she could avoid. Her dad had decided to take her to one of her favorite places in the world, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, to try and take her mind off things, but it wasn't working. Fruity Maze was her favorite arcade game at Freddy's. The premise of the game was simple: walk around a maze, collect all power-ups, and fruit. Everything was always normal, but after the accident, Susie couldn't help but imagine Max in the game. A lot of the fruit in the game was gone and replaced with an image of a dog that looked just like Max. Susie noticed in her peripheral vision that her frown was getting the attention of some of the surrounding adults. She couldn't tell whether they were sympathetic or judgmental, but she didn't care. She focused on the game. Eventually, she completed the game and restarted. She knew nothing in the game could have changed. There were no levels in the game. It was either you beat the game or you didn't. Susie liked to play the game over and over again. But strangely enough, not only were the dogs she'd seen in her previous game still here, now they were all sitting in pools of blood with eyes missing. Susie knew that she had to be seeing things. After all, how could the arcade game gauge the way that she was feeling? It didn't make sense. Even still, tears began rolling down her face. As Susie continued her game, she realized things were starting to feel strange. One of the power-ups you could find in the game was a lightning bolt which gave you a speed boost, but as Susie came across one, she very strangely couldn't pick it up. For some reason, the game was different. She had no increase in the amount of time she had to complete the level, and she had no extra speed. There was no way she could complete it in time. Susie still tried her best to win the game, but she was unable to. The timer ran out, and tears poured out of her eyes. She started hearing whispers around her, and she looked up to see that the faces of parents were aimed at her, seeming to express concern. Susie assumed they were sympathizing with the fact that she was crying. What else would they be concerned about when they were all looking at her? At least, she thought they were looking at her. Susie jumped when she felt a hand on her shoulder. "He's not really dead. He's over here. Follow me." The girl's face lit up immensely. William knew his plan was working. William had spoken prior to the girl's father, learning her name was Susie, and that her dog was recently hit by a car and killed. William wondered what the girl was crying over. Moments passed in a blur, with William having to walk very carefully so as to not trigger the spring locks. Luckily, he'd worn these suits many times over the past years, so he'd gotten quite good at it. Susie followed behind William as he led her to the safe room, an area off limits to guests and restricted from the animatronics programming. Susie's father had taken a bathroom break, leaving William with the perfect opportunity to lure Susie to the safe room. He ushered her inside the room and then went inside himself. He slammed and locked the door behind them. "Where is he?" she said with a smile of excitement on her face. William hadn't accounted for how he would try and calm Susie down. He worried for a minute that she would scream, but then realized that the safe rooms were soundproof. Even if Susie screamed, no one would hear her. Even if they did, the restaurant would be closing shortly. No one would find her in here. William suddenly realized that there had been faces watching him lure Susie away. He'd even seen some parents grabbing their children by the hand and pushing them to the exit. He was sure that the plan would still work, but he worried that he might get caught in the act. Should he just give up? Should he just let Susie go? No. I'll stick to the plan. William stalled Susie for as long as he could before the pizzeria closed for the night. Grant exited the bathroom to many people and their children rushing past him. The people around him looked panicked. He noticed a Fazbear employee amidst the chaos and speed walked over to him. "Excuse me, he looked at the employee's name tag. "Dominic, what's going on here?" Dominic seemed to be panicked as well. He was fidgeting, his eyes were wide, and his expression gave off an immense sense of dread. What looked like a yellow version of Bonnie grabbed a little girl and brought her somewhere else in the pizzeria. Everyone in the pizzeria stopped. Many people started leaving, worrying their children could be next, and myself and a few other employees searched the restaurant and found no sight of the rabbit or the kid, and so we're closing early. Clearly, we're not calming anybody down. God, this is almost as bad as those candy things. Grant ignored the last thing Dominic said. He'd heard enough. He suddenly felt the sense of dread flood through his own body now. He had to find Susie. He rushed away from Dominic and pushed through the crowd. Susie? Susie, where are you? He felt his voice break as he continued yelling for Susie while he searched the dining room of the restaurant to no avail. He rushed into the arcade and found no one. He continued to yell for Susie. He turned around and headed towards the exit. Maybe she went outside with everyone else just to be safe. A horrifying thought shot through Grant's mind. A yellow version of Bonnie grabbed a little girl. What if it was Susie? Grant rushed outside and scanned the crowd of people that had just left Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Susie was not among them. The worst had come. Susie was gone. The chaos had died down. The restaurant had gone silent. The bathroom was empty. The only occupied stall was the one he was in. The restaurant was now completely emptied out, with him just being left behind, all alone. What else was new? His parents had been gone for business today and part of tomorrow, and decided to leave him here at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. It seemed like they didn't account for the fact that he would have to be alone the entire night. He decided hiding in the bathroom was the best thing he could do. He hated his parents. He hated that they always dropped him off somewhere fun before abandoning him. They thought that if they dropped him off at his favorite pizzeria while they go to work, that makes them good parents. It didn't. He had the pizzeria to himself, so he decided he might as well make the most of it. The stall door creaked open. Little Jeremy stepped out of the bathroom stall closest to the wall. He suddenly heard a shuffling sound outside the bathroom. He rushed back into the stall and closed the door again without making a sound. The shuffling seemed to come from the main stage and past the bathrooms he was in. He always saw a door next to the bathrooms, but it was for employees only. Were there employees still in the pizzeria? Minutes went by. 3. 4. The sounds ended after about 4 minutes. Jeremy didn't want to risk going out until he was absolutely sure he was alone. Another few minutes passed, and Jeremy decided the coast was clear. The stall door creaked open again, and Jeremy slowly made his way through the bathroom and towards the exit. A muffled sound came from the wall to his right. The girls' bathroom was closer to the employees-only door than the boys', so it was very difficult to hear, but it sounded almost like an extremely muffled scream. The sound stopped just as suddenly as it started. Jeremy froze for a few seconds before continuing on his way. He headed out of the bathroom, through the dining room, and to the arcade. William heard the sounds of beeps and thumps as he exited the safe room and started towards the entrance to leave for the night. No one should have been here at this hour. He slowly and quietly walked through the dining room and towards the arcade and saw a young boy at an arcade machine. William got an idea. Step 1 of his plan was finished, but he knew that Susie and Susie alone wouldn't be enough. He rushed back through the dining room and stood at the front of the stage. The big brown leader of the band, Freddy, had stood at the front of the stage. Normally, his companions, Chica and Bonnie, would stand at either side of him, but Chica was no longer there. William had lugged Chica to the safe room and did exactly what he set out to do. She was still there. William turned to Bonnie and started towards him. He now began lugging Bonnie towards the safe room. He knew the boy would be able to hear it, but he didn't care. Soon enough, he wouldn't have the capacity to care. Or maybe he would. William got Bonnie to the safe room and re-equipped his Spring Bonnie springlock suit. He opened the safe room door and walked through the dining room, approaching the young boy. He put a hand on the boy's shoulder, who was standing at an arcade machine. Surprisingly, the boy wasn't as jumpy as Susie was, probably because he'd heard the sounds and knew he was here with someone else. "What's your name?" William asked the boy. The boy turned around and looked up at the large yellow rabbit suit with confidence and told him his name was Jeremy. "What a nice name. We know lots of Jeremys here at Freddy's. Who are you?" "I'm Bonnie. Not the blue one, I'm a different Bonnie." "Isn't Bonnie purple?" "Listen here, you little..." William paused. He didn't want to scare this kid before getting him to the safe room. He had to get Jeremy to want to come with him. "These games all suck. I know where all the really good games are. Wanna come see?" Jeremy's face lit up with excitement, just as Susie's had. "Yes! Where?" "Follow me." As Jeremy entered the safe room, William followed suit, shutting the door behind him. He turned towards Jeremy, who had been admiring the Bonnie animatronic. "Wanna get up close and personal?"